I was 11 or so when I was reading it, and this was most definitely an adult comic to the point where I would like try to get people to go into the comic store to buy it for me, and then they'd look out the window and see me out there and kick the guy out. But that was the first time that I think that I saw that comics could tell that type of emotionally resonant story, the type of thing that actually had an impact on how I look at my own life. It's where they sort of went from something that was just here's these beautiful drawings and a great story to, oh gosh, these things that we do in these pages can change people's lives.
Let's talk nerdy things like comic books and superheroes with some nerdy peeps, writers, cartoonists, and so much more. So stick around and have some fun with the lovely and adorable Evil Web.
Hello, darlings. Welcome to Titular Characters. I am your supremely adorable host, Eva Webb, and I'm here today with writer, cartoonist, and comics creator, the incredible Mike Fox. How are you, Mike?
I am well, Eva, and it is really great to talk to you. How are you doing tonight?
I am loving life. It's a Thursday night when we're recording this,
Mm-hmm.
and I have just had the most amazing week. I have run into some just very, very nice people in my job and in life in general and on Twitter. I love my Twitter people. Have you seen these guys? They are the best people in the world.
You have been overflowing this week on Twitter, so I'm not surprised that you've been having such a great week.
I've been having so much fun, just a ton of fun. I wanted to thank you for coming on my show. This is an interview that I have been like super excited about because we've talked about creating comics and art in general by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like, I feel like you and I are probably going to like tread over some ground we've hit before, but because those were some great conversations, and they have been. And you're just so entertaining and fun to talk to. So I'm really excited to have you. So where does it start with you and comics, you
Uh,
think?
do you mean chronologically or, emotionally? Because if we're going
I
back,
would say emotionally.
oh, that one's actually easy. It's the most boring and simple answer, but it's storytelling. The problem I had growing up was that I never stopped talking, which I've slowly turned into an asset over the years. But the idea was just that I loved telling people stories, and I've sort of honed in on that to today, where I look at the medium just as an opportunity to tell a story, and then I love to tell stories about those stories. So for me, that's the start and end point, storytelling.
Were there any comics that you feel like really inspired you to be a cartoonist or an illustrator?
There were three. The very first comic I ever bought was an X-Men comic. I have it somewhere in a box in a special bag. I couldn't tell you what happens in it, but it was the first time I ever saw something like that. I was maybe 8 or 9, and I think we got one on a spinner rack during a power outage, and I read it by candlelight, so it had this like religious connotation to it. And the flickering light. It was almost like fire on a cave wall, and I'm up there doing pictograms or something. So that one stuck with me, just as my first exposure of visual storytelling. And for years, I would go back to that issue and just look at it and remember how I felt and be like, how can I make people feel like that? The next series that I came across, I picked it up. I used to just go to comic conventions and just pick up as many random comics as I could for however much I had in my pocket. And I think I stumbled. It might have been my first indie comic, even. It was an anthro series called Arcana. I only had 3 issues of it, but it was not only was it my first exposure to anthro comics and that type of illustration style, but it was my first indie comic, and it was just this really nice, almost sort of like medieval fantasy type story that I just got really invested in. And I even used Arcana as my screen name for years in the mid 90s. Yeah, I've been online since about 94, and I don't think I've gotten off in that interim. So, and then finally, I think the one that really, really sort of changed things for me was I think it's Hepcats. That was it started off as like a college newspaper type 4 panel cartoon, and eventually just became this long, beautifully like Brandywine type illustration drawn out comic that was just telling, this depressing but moving story of the main character that was. I was 11 or so when I was reading it, and this was most definitely an adult comic to the point where I would like try to get people to go into the comic store to buy it for me, and then they'd look out the window and see me out there and kick the guy out. But that was the first time that I think that I saw that comics could tell that type of emotionally resonant story, the type of thing that actually had an impact on how I look at my own life. It's where they sort of went from something that was just, here's these beautiful drawings and a great story to, oh gosh, these things that we do in these pages can change people's lives, and we have a responsibility to them as a result. I love Hepcats, and I gotta brag. I ended up never buying the trade paperback, and this year I asked my wife to buy it for me for Christmas, and I think she did, so I think finally I get to see how that series ends.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That is beautiful.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Are you just one of these people who was naturally talented, or did you have to learn it and practice? How'd you
Well,
get there?
Well, when it comes to people who say that they're, or when people describe someone as naturally talented, I have a particular outlook on that. I think that drawing is a skill that anybody can develop over time, and what you have the natural talent for is really just the natural patience for the process it takes to get good at it. There are people who sit down to draw because they want this really beautiful end result, or they, saw their favorite anime and they want to recreate that. Those people, I think, when they first sit down, have equal skill level and equal potential as anybody else. What differentiates people is the ones who, when you have to do your practice sketches, when you have to learn how to make, what elements go into a face, how does anatomy work, and the people that are looking at light and shadow and wondering what they can do with that. The people that have patience and sincere passion for the grunt work that goes into it, I think that's where the natural differences are. I think the physical act of putting images on paper, or in this age digital, is a skill that can be learned and taught. But yeah, it's how people handle themselves during the very long process to get good at it. Uh, my I had a little bit of both. I had been drawing since I was very young. My mom kept my first drawing I ever made. I think I was 2 years old, and I drew a face, and I've seen it. It's a scribble. It's a circle with two other scribbles in it. But she said, she was very proud of her 2 year old, and she was like, "Oh, it's got a nose, it's got a mouth. But your sister didn't draw like that when you were 2." So she sort of had this impression of me as a very observant child. So she might have pushed me towards it, but even with just using drawing for visual storytelling, I was as young as 9, 8, and I was literally drawing my life story out in these I had hundreds and hundreds of little pieces of scrap paper that I would draw out different scenes from my life on, for better or worse. And I kept them in basically a shoebox, and I had this basically visual autobiography. And those drawings were not good, but I very much enjoyed doing them, and I very much enjoyed what they said about me and what they communicated that I could not say with words at that time. Um, and I'll tell you when I started looking at art differently, very specifically. I don't know why I remember it in this much detail, but my parents were downstairs watching a rated R movie. I think there was nudity in it, so I had to stay upstairs. Years later, I figured out it was date night and they were making out, but so I had to stay up in my room, and all I had was, you know, dot matrix printer paper and a issue of Nintendo Power about TMNT2, the arcade game. So what I
Nice.
so what I do is I just sat there and draw it had these really like lovely sketchy, watercolor illustrations to go along with it, and I sat there and I drew them, and I had this, very rough, very loose style going on. I was in fourth grade, but something clicked, and it looked really cool. It looked like what was in the book, because when you're a kid, you draw, almost you draw representations of an eye or something that you don't sit there and look at a human eye and render it as it looks with all the proper anatomy and skin and everything. You draw a circle with another circle in it, and then you put eyelashes on it, and that's a symbol of an eye. I had, because I was copying and bored and just sort of in this weird state, I realized, oh, I can do something different than I used to do when I was having my fun little drawings now. And I sort of got so excited about this, I ran down with a sheet of paper to my parents and interrupt their makeout session and screamed, "Mom, I figured out how to draw!" And I held the paper up, and they're just like, "Well," I remember specifically my mom being like really annoyed but kind of impressed. So she was like, "Well, go back up and do another then." And then I kept doing that all night until finally they just told me to go to bed. Uh,
Wow.
so that's how I got into being good at like drawing as like versus just doing a thing for fun that you do as a kid. Like the transition from fun crayon stuff to, oh, I'm an artist now. And what I found was when I brought this new skill into school, I became Mike, the kid that draws good, the best drawer in the class. I always love that word. It makes no
It's a good
sense.
word.
It's I don't think it makes any sense verb tense wise, but it's always made me super happy to hear. And I went from being this really antisocial outcast kid that was really rude and weird, just a complete loner too. Oh, Mike will draw you things, and all of a sudden I had friends, and that's sort of when I realized I could sort of use art to bring people into my life, and that was a very strong motivation. So after that, obviously, I said I picked up a comic book for the first time and realized you could tell stories with it, etc., etc. But yeah, that's my little origin story there.
That's amazing. I feel like I have a similar kind of background. I when I was a
Yeah.
kid, and I would draw. My mom had this. I feel like she had way more faith in my ability to draw than I ever did. You know.
That tends to
So
happen.
so like I'm going through these comic books, and this is like 1989, 1990, and I'm saying, oh wow, I love the art in this. And my mom would look down at it, and she'd say, yeah, you know what, you could do better.
Oh, and did
It
you
was
eventually believe her?
I did. No, actually, no, that's not true. I don't think I ever did. Um,
Well, you ought to.
I don't know. I feel like as an adult, I got into like graphic design and commercial design and layouts and websites and user interfaces and stuff like that. I feel like I have more fun with code than I do actually with pen and paper. You know?
That makes you a wizard to me. As as much fun as I can have with graphite on paper, I've had people ask me to design something, and I'm like a dog that's been shown a card trick. I just have no idea, like no instinct for design and stuff like that. Especially how you make those little widgets go, or what. I don't know anything about websites, but however you do that, it blows my mind. So I just have this amazing amount of respect for people who just take to that so well.
Yeah, it's really funny. I've always been one of those people that just sort of finds themselves in a situation, and I will either be able to solve the problem, or I will walk away from it not being able to solve the problem, and never speak of it again. And when it came to code, I just happened to be in the right place in the right time, and I found myself one morning working at this web development company in Seattle, and I don't know how we did it, but somehow we had managed to attract like 20 huge corporations with just pure bullshit, right?
Well,
We
yeah.
have like uh, just companies that I can't name that are
Mhm.
brands that you would know, and these were my first projects, and none of us actually knew how to do anything.
Of course not. Well, no, what you
So
knew
we
how to
went
do was convince them that you did. Or
Exactly.
at least that you were more interested in doing it than anyone else.
Or that we were very excited about technology in general, which we were.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we started this, and we built out some of the first big custom experiences. Things like we built the first car builder. Uh, if you know anything about internet history, I just kind of named the company because there's only one company that did that back in '97. And we did home building algorithms. We did games. We did websites. Oh man, it was so much fun. And as I'm going, it's sort of like leveling up in a video game.
Yeah.
You get more power. You get better at it. And it's a lot of the same muscles. Not like with the
Mhm.
hands so much, but like in your head, like
Yeah.
when you're drawing. Um, it's a lot of the same creative pieces of your brain that go into work. You know, like when you're drawing something, sometimes you need to calculate the distance between like the bridge of your nose and an ear, right?
Hmm.
And you do the same thing when you're calculating, sales tax in code. I know it sounds weird,
Yeah,
um,
no, I'm with you. I'm following you.
but it's sort of the same kind of creative thing. Um, So we were talking about at one point how you had um, given up drawing for a while.
Oh gosh, yeah. Um, that there's a sequence of events there, and I'm going to start at the beginning of that.
No
Okay,
problem.
so I told you, I picked up my comics. I used to love to go to conventions and pick up random comics. The reason I was at those conventions when I was 12, 13, 14 was specifically because I would bring my art portfolio around and show it to different artists and say, okay, what do I need to do? I want to draw comics. And they would give me advice, but it was great. And I eventually became such a regular at these places that they would recognize, a lot of the different artists would recognize me. And sometimes they'd even sit me down behind the, desk where they're signing autographs and give me an art lesson. But they're like, you're almost there on this. So, I would go to these conventions, I would talk to editors, I would talk to artists, I would talk to writers, and just everybody knew me on the East Coast, and I was getting the best possible art, school I could get for drawing comics. And eventually, and I can name it since they're defunct now, I met with the editor of Sirius, and I just showed him my work, and it was, my best at the time, and apparently I was there because he asked how old I was. I was 15, and I think Trent Kaniga, I can never pronounce his last name, but he did create. He's now very active in the art school, and he does a lot of game design work. Kanuiga, but he was very big at the time because he was a teenage artist, and a lot of the, his book was selling, I think, based partially on his youth, and I think Sirius wanted that because they mentioned that when they were talking to me, and they said, you know, here's my card, send me a couple of pages, we'll give you a book, whatever you want. And so I was like 15. Uh, you know, the guy with the power to make that decision said, "You're in. Yes, pitch me your idea." Um, and immediately I went into just a massive depression. I went into a like life destroying depression for about 20 years or so. Uh,
I believe it or not, I completely understand
yeah,
that particular pace.
yeah, and it was, obviously it was a response to conditions was existed before. A bunch of stuff had caught up with me, and I think in my head I was just like, "Oh gosh, no, nothing can be this good. I don't deserve this." And so I stopped drawing completely, and I became a musician. I went to music school, and then I drank consistently for about 15 years, maybe. I like to consider it like professional drinking because if you want to be really good at something, you have to do it every day. And so I did it every day. There's a whole summer that I don't remember. And apparently that summer was 2 years long.
Wow.
So I got a lot of great stories that people tell me about, and it's like watching a watching a soap opera. Um,
I tried to do the same thing at the same age, and I just did not have the talent for it. I
to
didn't.
drink?
Yeah, I'm just not good at it.
Well, some people, I guess maybe there is such a thing as a natural talent for drinking because I definitely had. I don't anymore. I probably could, but I'm too busy to mess around with that anymore. But so 20 years goes by. I had my music career very briefly. Uh, I ended up working for a marketing company, and we had just bought a house at some point, and my wife is going through the boxes of our old stuff, and she looks at some of my old comic pages, and she goes, "Well, these are really good. I bet you could do this if you picked it up again." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, I don't need to get back into it. I'm really good already." So I started drawing to show off, just how good I was. And I had forgotten all of it. I realized quickly that I was at, zero once again. I was that 2 year old in the kitchen drawing some squiggles my mom thought was nice. Um, so I put it off for another couple of years because I was embarrassed. And I was working at a marketing company, and we had this great idea to sell T-shirts. And this is when that indie T-shirt revolution was just coming on, and everybody had their like nerd culture shirt company coming out. And we had our own little spin on it, and I ended up just getting a digital tablet and saying, "Heck it, I'm gonna start drawing again." And it took me about 7 years to get back to where I'd left off at when I was 15. And at first, I just tried to brute force it, and that was not happening. Then I decided, all right, I'm gonna take online art lessons, and that helped a little bit. But what I had was an emotional problem with drawing, and it was exactly the same thing that had stopped me the first time. You sit down to draw and you do it for 20 minutes and it's not good and you feel awful, or you get bored and you want to walk away. And I did two things. Because right now, if my wife doesn't stop me, I will draw 12 uninterrupted hours and not even blink. I could do this all day and I love it. But I couldn't manage 15 minutes of focus back then. And I say that's down to two things that got me from absolute chaos, still drinking at the same time, to putting 60 hours a week into this and loving it. The number one thing I did was I started throwing out my sketchbooks, every single one of them. I would fill every page and then immediately throw it in the trash. And the reason that I did that was because the mistakes that I made me so self-conscious that I felt this just enormous amount of shame that I could not draw this thing that I spent an entire sketchbook trying to get right. A human face, working on hands, or perspective. But I realized when I threw it out, that meant no one was going to see it but me, and I felt completely free to make all the mistakes that you need to make to get better. So that helped a lot. That took off so much of the pressure. And then the other thing that I changed was, I felt really bad because I'm like, I used to love drawing, and I can only draw for 15 minutes at a time. I must not have any motivation. And I kind of realized, of course, I have motivation. Me sitting here saying I want to have a comic and an art career, that means I'm motivated. I want that thing. That is motivation. I'm taking steps towards that goal. That's motivation. So what's the problem I have? My problem was what I was mentioned before, the physical act of sitting down to draw. I had an emotional problem with that. Um, I had a problem with the work, and so I had a therapist at the time, still do. Everybody should. And I had her work on it with me with a specific program to not not create motivation out of thin air. It already existed, but to change my relationship with the physical act of sitting down to draw. And we worked on it for about 3 months. And when I no longer had anxiety about, holding the pencil in my hand and looking at the paper, excuse me, when I no longer had that anxiety, it became just absolute pleasure to draw, and I started doing it all the time. I started being able to just fall down the rabbit hole with art lessons, and it completely changed from that point on, and that's when things started actually happening.
That's awesome. So when you got back into it and you started practicing and you started creating things, what was the spark that went off in your head where you said, I want to draw just neat animal comics.
That had always been there, actually.
Really?
Yeah, the story that I'm telling in my comic right now, um, I wrote it when I was 12, and it is not the same comic I wrote when I was 12. But when I said I used to make those little drawings of my life when I was younger, about all the things that had happened to me, and then I got older and I was going, bringing these pages out to the comic conventions. I was bringing pages of this comic. I had these characters. Um, it was great because I had anthro characters, and I remember, some of the artists they'd be like, "Oh," and they would assume because I had anthro characters that I was gay, which was not far off. And they would send me, they'd point back and say, "Hey, when your dad's not looking, go over to that table over there. They got some this or that." So,
Wow.
but the story I ended up writing, and I didn't realize this until 2 years ago, talking to my therapist, explaining the comic I wanted to do to her. And I was writing basically an allegory almost for my life. I had written it when I was 12. It was very dark and unpleasant, and it was very like the most like grim dark type effed up, you know, comic you can do with little animal people. And about 5 years ago, or rather 2 years ago, when I was talking about it with my therapist, I had the idea. I'm like, well, wait, if this story is me, why don't I rewrite it and give myself a better ending since I can do that? So I went back and I rewrote it, uh, and I chose, I kept some of the dark stuff because you need contrast in a story, but I chose a way to go with it that was sort of aspirational. Specifically, why I chose animal people, I've always been furry trash. I was the first time I heard the word furry was in 1995, talking to the person who had created the very first Disney's Robin Hood fan site on the internet, back when fan sites were a thing, and it just always appealed to me. Maybe it's something sweet, it's innocent. You can do a lot more, I think, emotionally with sort of cartoon characters than maybe I can do with humans. Like I said, I was always the sort of outsider weird kid. I don't have great relationships with people, so maybe that's why I push back onto this sort of fictional type of protagonist. But the story's always been there. I've been waiting 20 years to tell it. I have a bunch more. There's some artists who have a story they want to tell and some who want to tell stories. I decided to start with this story because I've been waiting so long.
That's neat. There's a couple of things that come to mind. First is looking through your comic, and it's as long as I've known you existed, your comic has been one of these things I like to check in on over at what's it called? It's called
SpaceMonkComics.com.
Space Smut Comics. Yeah, that's the one. And I really like your how simple the website is. It's really easy to get in. But the art in the comic is just so dynamic and so fluid. It's really just pretty art to look at. I love the way you use color and the way your pages are laid out. It's all very clean and very smooth looking. Um, so do you think there's a big difference between the way you draw now with a tablet and a computer versus how you did it when you were a kid? Because I'm guessing that you're about my age.
Yeah, I
And
think
that,
I think we're exactly the same age if I recall.
right on, yeah.
Yeah. Um, it's weird because I was thinking about that because just the other day I had found my first comic attempt, just a little cartoon web comic from 10 years ago, and I posted it versus a splash page from today, and even before that I was doing some research, looking up some old '90s comics that were from the web, and I completely by accident fell into this. I cannot remember the name of it, but fell into this web series that I had drawn a guest strip for as this like 15 or 16-year old. I begged the guy, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, I don't have time this week. We'll do this." And that was a big thing in webcomics in the 90s. You do a guest strips to bring more people in because you had web rings, and I found it, and so I've been actually thinking about that, how my art has changed over the years, and fundamentally, it the core of it hasn't. Um, obviously, I can much easier render what's in my head these days than I could 15 years ago, but it's the same aspiration. It's just now informed by the technical proficiency you get with repetition, and maybe some different choices as far as lighting that you pick up from art lessons over the time. But the choices I make, and the choice and the way that I render characters, the how I chose to do timing and beats, that's all the same. That's always just been the natural language that I use. Just technically better over the years as you get better at art.
That's awesome. In general, so do you feel like you're still maturing as an artist?
I
That you're always learning and growing?
Oh gosh, I feel like I just started. Um, like I said, it took me 7 years to get back to where I left off at when I was 15, and having reached that point and then sort of doing a self evaluation. Um, I look at, like, one of the big things I always want to be is one of those digital painters that has this lovely fluid style that just looks very natural, almost like the type of art that you see in concept art. That's what I want to be at, and I am nowhere near there. And I think what is that, the Dunning-Kruger curve or whatever, they show experience versus confidence. I've gone past the very starting phase where you're thinking to yourself, I'm pretty good, I'm a real artist, I feel great, and I've just gone over that hurdle where I have enough knowledge to know how much I don't know, and I feel absolutely at the start of it. And like I said, that is super exciting to me because I know how much I'm going to learn over the next 4, 5, 10 years, and I know I'm still going to be excited by this stuff in the next 20 years. So yeah, I think if every artist thinks of themselves at the very start, and that makes them excited, they're going to do just fine.
I love it. I love it. The other thing I think is really cool is the way it's like there's this guy on the internet. He's been around for ages and ages. He's a marketing guru,
Mm-hmm.
and his rules are he has these rules for how to market things effectively. And those rules, I think, if memory serves, I'm going to screw this up, but you'll get the gist.
Yeah.
The first rule is, have a good product.
Mm-hmm.
The second rule is um, make it easy to get to, and the third is be awesome. And I think you have that third one covered. I just love the way you engage with the people who are interested and appreciate your product. It's really cool.
Oh my God, that is the thing I did not expect whatsoever, was for those people to exist, and it is the absolute best thing in my life. I cannot believe that how excited these people are and how great they are as people. Um, uh, I think about maybe 6 months ago, middle of the pandemic, I was doing weekly art streams live, and I had a small group of fans and friends that we talked to, and one of them suggested, why don't you have a Discord server? So I had to Google what Discord server was because I had no idea. And I thought it was a great idea, and they said, I'll help you. And of course, then they had to travel for work, and I didn't talk to them again for 3 months. But I set one up, and I just invited a handful of people that I knew were cool, that I knew I got along with. And my thought was that I'm going to put this link up to the Discord server on my website and make it this open community that is about, my comic, and, maybe I'll get a few readers. And very quickly, it became this just extremely active, thriving community of the best people in my life. And it is, no longer about my comic. I have a little tab on the Discord where I post pages that let me update to, but uh, just we all bring that sort of energy to each other, and maybe it's because it happened in the middle of the pandemic, and maybe it's the people that I chose, but we all have this just natural and almost compulsive need to care for and motivate each other because we are so thankful um, for what each other bring into each other's lives. We've had, I was joking online the other day. I said, Fox Chat is a machine where you enter and immediately you get assigned, a therapist and you go on HRT within 2 months. Um, we
Nice.
have, yeah, we have just created this, support network where we just enable each other's dreams, and that has always been like something I'm just super passionate about. Where if someone's like, I kind of want to do this thing, I jump on them almost. Probably it used to be probably very obnoxious with it. Like, how can I help? How can I help? Oh, I know about this. Let's do this. Here's what you should do. And then check in with them every day. Like, how's your dream coming? Did you do the thing yet? Did you do the thing yet? And it's and I always phrase it like I went through a long period of being very isolated and alone, and I very much want people to take care of me and be excited for me. And the only way I can expect or hope for that is if I care about other people just as much. So that's sort of how I motivate that. And so when I see someone that I made a post the other day where I was just like asking readers for some advice on what do I do for season 2 of the comic? How should I handle this? And I got 15 people I had never talked to before, excitedly responding about the comic, and I sat there and like cried for a minute, like, oh my god, it's real, it's happening. These people care about me, and it's the best thing, in hands down, best thing in the world.
That's amazing. It's crazy that feeling you get when people start fangirling out when you talk to them. Um, it just feels so weird to be taken seriously.
Yeah,
I just in general.
yeah, it is weird because you haven't changed. You're still the same person you were 6 years ago. You were still trying to figure this stuff out, and you don't know where it just feels so alien. And yeah, I'm sure you get it too, where you're like, I don't deserve this. Or if you're like me, you're paranoid and you go, okay, now I have a responsibility to people. I better work extra hard.
Yeah, I get it. I just started getting it like maybe about 3 months ago,
That
where
sounds about
people
right.
people will just come up to me and they'll be like, I just love and admire what you do so much, and I'm like, I'm just me. I'm the same me. I'm not special, and it's just really awesome, and just how amazing people are. They always surprise me. You know.
Yeah, well, you
It,
definitely do have that thing where yeah, I'm not sure if it's through the positivity or through the work ethic where you use your work to bring the best people towards you. And the nature of what you do almost always tends to be enabling, inspiring, or motivating others. So it makes sense that they would, see this type of stuff you put together, feel some kind of way about it, and just be really grateful because that's sort of you know outward expression. Usually, people want to bring attention in towards them. They don't want to give something back. So that's sort of a rare thing, and you do it well. So I absolutely see why you're getting people that appreciate that.
it's great. It's great. It's like I keep saying. I think I've said this now on probably 3 shows in a row, but it doesn't stop being true. I don't know how I did it, but I have attracted the best people in the world on Twitter. And you and I have a lot of overlap, so I don't feel bad about saying that.
Oh no, yeah. We,
Um,
we, we trade friends all the time. I think about a
that's
third of
true.
my readers probably are probably your friends.
That's probably true. And that goes both ways.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So I can tell that it's almost getting to be that time. So I thought I would ask you the speculative questions
Oh
for
gosh.
the end of the show.
Sure.
You excited?
I'm anxious, but that's sort of a default state.
All right. So the question is, And I think your answers are going to be interesting. I can just tell right now.
Uh-oh.
Um, all right. So if you were a superhero,
Hmm.
you just wake up one morning and you have superpowers. What are those powers? What do you use them for? And do you pick a costume?
No costume. I don't want to stand out. and
Nice.
and heroes shouldn't stand out. I think they should be everyday people. Being a hero should be like literally, baked into your behavior. And my superpower would absolutely just be an innate sense to know when someone needs something. Um, that because I just the other day, someone put up a cute little post on Twitter. How do you know I'm depressed? I tell you everything's fine. And it's a funny, relatable post, but it's really effing relatable. And if I could walk around and just be the guy that walks by someone and just knows enough to go, hey, how's it going? And talk with them for 5 minutes and sort of be that sort of person that makes that change in their life. I could do that. I could totally do that. I don't need to have a cape for that. It's better if I don't. And I have noticed, especially when I'm at work, if you behave in a certain way that is kind to others, that inspires other people to do it as well. So you wouldn't just be the weight of these people's emotional needs wouldn't be on you. What you'd be doing is fostering a culture and community in your little immediate circle of kindness to each other. So you would start out as the superhero, but you would quickly turn into the Avengers or something. Everybody would care about each other. Totally, yeah.
I love it. I love it. You are so much fun to talk to, just in general.
Just give me 6 Red Bulls and turn me on. I won't stop.
Uh, that's great. I love it. I love your message as a superhero is to inspire others, how to bring them together. So you're collectively building something bigger, something more powerful. I think there's definitely something engaging about that message.
And it works. I'll just tell a real quick story just from yesterday. I'm super sore today because I fell in the snow. We had a horrible snowstorm yesterday, and the reason I fell in the snow was, we got let out of work early. We're going uphill towards a red light, and this guy in like a little Camry gets stuck on some ice, spinning his tires, can't turn to get past the red light, blocking 3 lanes of traffic, and everyone's just honking their horns. For about a minute and a half, they were just honking at this guy, who was obviously pounding the gas trying to move his car. Well, guess what? Honking the horns isn't going to get this guy out of your way. So I got out of the car, and I'm about 130 pounds smoking wet or soaking wet, and I start pushing it, knowing there's absolutely no chance I'm going to move a car uphill. But I keep pushing it, I keep rocking it, and I'm waiting because I know I'm not going to move it. I'm way too small. And lo and behold, about 30 seconds later, this big lumberjack dude comes out and basically lifts the car and pushes it away. So
Wow.
that's sort of the effect that I'm talking about, where you go, I know I can't fix this, but everybody can if we just give them a template to follow.
That is absolutely beautiful. That's really cool.
But I fell down in the process. I'm super sore.
Oh, yeah, anytime you go out in weather like that, though, you're going to get wet, you're going to get yucky,
Yeah,
especially if you're trying to do good for people. That involves cars.
yeah. You could do worse, I guess.
That's true. Oh my goodness. So Mike, thank you so much for coming on my show today. Where can people find you? What would you like to promote?
First, let me just say thank you for having me. This is the most fun I've had all week, so this has been great.
I'm here.
And as far as where people can find me, I specifically bought a domain to make everything easy. Lieutenant Freya Comics, which is my comic book, as well as other projects. Everything will be posted to spacesmutcomics.com. You can get my Twitter from there. I'm extremely active, and if you're curious about the Fox Chat world, just send me a DM.
That's awesome. I think that's the best domain name I've seen probably in 10 years, just in general. That's amazing. Space smut. I love it.
I was very proud of myself for that one. I'll be honest.
Oh, it's great. It's great. Oh boy, I wish I had the courage to buy one like that, just in general.
I didn't know if it was legal, honestly. I was surprised they let me do it.
Nice. So, what do you think you would ask the audience?
Well, I actually was kind of thinking about this, and because I am sort of just sometimes a little self-obsessed, I'd actually ask them something that would help me. And it's because I'm going into season 2 of my comic now. Originally, it was started all on pre-existing source material, and now I really get to dream and I really get to have a good time with it. And I would love answers on this if people would want to hit me up with it, but the difference between representation and inclusion and how you go about that, things people would want to see. Representation being when you just include characters of a certain type, or you give, you name check, a certain identity. But, what type of responsibilities does an artist have to actually make people feel represented? Where does the line between those two things go? And how do they, as readers, interpret that and notice it when they see it? That's what I would love answers on.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I'd like answers on that too. That would be great.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of things that it's something that does get discussed a lot, but I don't think that there's really, any sort of path, I think, for artists and writers to look to understand that. And I think a lot of times they just got to make their mistakes and learn from them. But, some sort of, actual feedback from people, some sort of guidepost on that, voices to listen to, and, foundations they can look to as writers, the way we look to in, for anything else as far as style. I'd love to see more discussion on that in general. I think that it's there, but it's not really banked towards writers. It usually comes off in the form of criticism when people get it wrong, which is good and necessary. But there's not a lot of guideposts on how to get it right, which is going to be different for every group. But I think, yeah, if people would want to talk about that, I would be following that hashtag.
And now, your answers. We only got 3 tweets this time. It was partially my fault because of just the short notice. I realized I hadn't recorded the segment yet, and everybody was really, really cool. So the 3 answers we got are from actual writers, and they are just amazing. So I'm going to read them here. The first one is by Jim Seals, and he says, as a writer, I want to strike a chord. I want people to be seen and heard. So the representation I write is a balancing act between sincere earnestness that's honest, while avoiding the appropriation or objectification of people. LaRocco, writer and artist at Black Fly Press, says, getting it right for everyone is not impossible. What is offensive for one may be empowering to another. The key is to not bullshit. And when that is lacking, do more listening than writing. If you don't understand an issue, don't try to write about it. Learn. G.E. Walker says, to me, it's really simple. Apply the following process. Stop. Stop what you're doing. Collaborate. Find someone who knows this shit firsthand. Listen. Shut the fuck up for a bit and listen to them. I really find that this is the best possible decision-making process. More information about Mikefox can be found at spacesmutcomics.com. I'm going to say that again, spacesmutcomics.com. mikefox.com. It's just fun to say. I tell you, interviews like this are why I started podcasting and why I keep doing it. Oh my God, Fox, if you're listening, thank you. Again, you're awesome, and I love you. Titular Characters is a podcast about the things we love, produced it, and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. That's me. Podcast art by Lexiva, who's so talented. I love her. Our theme song was written and composed by Antonia Marquini. Dramatic music and closing theme by Speed Force Music. Mixing and sound by Jocelyn McPherson, who is beautiful. Want to get in on the Twitter fun? Just follow me at Eva is adorable and wait for the next question to drop. Then, as quickly as you can, put in your answer, and I'll do my best to get it into the next episode we record. Oh, did you know we're taking donations now? To take part, go to buymeacoffee.com/EvaIsAdorable. Chip in $5 or more and have your name and comment read at the beginning of the next episode we record. All proceeds go to production costs and keeping this podcast shining. And that's it. And that's all we got. Join us next time for another exciting adventure in cyberspace. Oh, and when you do, bring candy.